G'day, leaders. In this episode, we had the privilege of sitting down with Susan Warda. Susan is a partner at the law firm Mills Oakley. She's a family lawyer who's been in the business for 30 years now, and in 2013 was named Woman Lawyer of the Year in Private Practice by the Women Lawyers Association of New South Wales. We got to chat to her about all of the lessons she's learned on her journey about being a family lawyer, but also as a leader. Enjoy.
Why did it count backwards? I know that we're now recording.
What?
Hello, Captain.
What do I?
Come fly with me. Let's fly away.
What are we going to talk about?
I don't know. So, leadership, life, and everything else.
Yeah.
And we're live.
No, we're recording. Sorry, Susan, we do this all the time. It's a bit of a bugbear.
And our neighbour, who's our biggest fan, he says, you've got to keep doing it because it annoys Michelle, so I'm not going to stop.
Probably not a good thing to do in front of a family lawyer.
No. Note taken.
And welcome, Susan Warda. So you're,
Thank you for having me.
As you said, a family lawyer, and I've known you for just on 10 years now.
Might even be a bit longer because I think we met before I moved my practice to Mills Oakley.
Yes, it was.
And we've hit 10 years last month at Mills Oakley.
Wow. Okay.
So
time
a bit
flies.
longer than that, and time does fly, yes.
Yeah. So the reason why we asked you to be on our podcast is about life and leadership and exemplary leadership. And I thought of you, and I've spoken to Guy and told him so much about you. I've watched you over the time that I've known you, not only yourself in your leadership style, but how you have encouraged and mentored and brought up with you other lawyers within your companies that you've been at, the businesses you've been at. And I've got goosebumps. You're a great example of a leader who doesn't just, fight to get to the top, but brings people with you. And so I love your style.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome. So what we want to know is your background. Have you always been interested in law?
I have. I think from the time I was certainly in high school and being part of the debating team and studying legal studies and being part of the mock trial and watching television shows that were always courtroom dramas.
What's your favourite?
Well, back then it was probably things that aren't on anymore, but I certainly was an Ally McBeal fan for a long time. I watched LA Law, and then probably a decade ago when The Good Wife was on, I certainly enjoyed watching Alicia Florrick and her life in The Good Wife. But yes, always wanted to do law, didn't really know what area of law, but that decision was kind of made for me because in the first firm I went to work in 1993, the two partners had a very mixed practice, a varied practice, but neither of them were really interested in family law. That was the emotional stuff that they didn't want to get involved in. And so there I was at 23 as a very junior lawyer, not knowing anything about practice, let alone a lot of experience about relationships, being given the family law work that came in the door. And for the first 2 years, I did everything that the partners didn't want to do. So it was a variety of work, small matters, being sent to different courts in and around Sydney. And then about the third year, probably about 1995, 1996, that became my area. And whenever the calls came in to them about that work, it was always allocated to me. And I developed a family law practice and I really enjoyed it. And I have to say, having hit 30 years of admission in June last year,
congratulations.
I still enjoy it as much as I did then. I've seen a lot of changes within the law, but within society. And the observations I've made have been really interesting to see who I'm working with now compared to who I was seeing day in, day out 20 years ago and 30 years ago, and how grey divorces, for example, have were just not there when I was a younger lawyer in the 90s, and we're now seeing people divorcing later. I'd say probably when I hit 20 years admission, so maybe 10 years ago, a lot more internet relationships started, dating apps that led to people having relationships and then those relationships breaking down. Facebook, when Facebook became a big thing at some stage during my career, we saw people reconnecting with old school friends, perhaps through social media, deciding that they wanted to rekindle those old relationships that led to marriage breakdown, or marrying someone who lived in another country and the complications that go with relocating children.
I've never thought about it like that your industry has evolved and changed because of technology.
Has. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
wow.
Technology had an impact. And I'd say what's happened in the last decade with the grey divorce, and having more clients in their 70s and 80s than we've ever seen before going through family law proceedings, is generally because people are living longer. There's more money. Certainly if you practice in Sydney, everyone made a gain over the years through their home values increasing. So I think there's been a number of contributing factors to why we see people separating at a later age that we probably wouldn't have considered, or people wouldn't have considered 30 years ago.
I wouldn't have thought of that. There is one in particular that comes to mind that's in the media a lot, that's a grey person, an older person, and he has had a number of wives which are publicly, and you don't, apart from celebrities, not that he's really a celebrity, but he's in the news. I wouldn't have considered that older people were getting divorced.
Yes, I often refer to them, to my lawyers, as the true believers in love, and they keep coming back. You know, I was acting for a lady up until a few months ago, and her matter resolved, and it's the third time I've acted for her. I've acted for it in each decade of my career. Yes, and I said to her, when you meet husband number 4, I think we need to go through a vetting exercise and maybe a prenup.
That's it,
because
get the paperwork in order.
Yes, beforehand. And you don't think of family lawyers as having repeat work as such, because people generally used to have one marriage breakdown. But the longer you've been practicing, the more likelihood there is of you being able to see that client again and work with them again. And it might not be for another marital breakdown. It might, in fact, be for a financial agreement if they've decided to enter the next relationship with a prenup or similar. Yeah.
So you targeted law. You always wanted to be a lawyer, but you seem to have fallen into family law by the sounds of it.
I think like a lot of young lawyers, because I know when we meet young lawyers who start with us here at the firm, they're unsure as to which area of law they think they'll be interested in. I knew very quickly that I'd be interested in an area where I was working with people rather than drafting documents. You know, I didn't ever imagine I would enjoy being a lawyer, sitting in an office, drafting contracts and leases and documents of that nature, and would probably find myself in an area where I actually had more client contact. And enjoy that interaction and an opportunity which family law gives you to also do some advocacy work. Whereas depending on the area of law you've chosen, you may not need to really have a lot of conversations with clients. If you're engaged to draft documents, you might have some initial meetings, but are very different to what we do and the high touch points that our clients have and need.
You took on family law because the two gentlemen that you worked for initially didn't want to touch it.
Some of us are probably better at dealing and managing with those things. And I have male colleagues who are equally good at managing family law matters, you know, who are brilliant lawyers, as well as having if I call it the softer skills to manage clients. But I think the partners I was working for when I started in 1993 was a different era. family law was practiced quite differently to what it's become as well.
Yeah.
There was a lot less collaboration. That movie, The War of the Roses, was probably more reflective of that time.
Okay.
And whilst you still have acrimonious and bitter separations now, the rules of the court, the education lawyers are provided with at ongoing conferences, and the expectations the court has and the clients, it's to try and collaborate wherever possible to minimise issues and to progress matters differently. And that's really changed. It's very different now. Even the terminology, when I started, it was custody. If children lived with you, you had custody of those children.
Yeah.
Or you had access to the children if you were the parent who visited them. And that language was changed. So the government changed the legislation. Amendments have come through a few times in the times in the 3 decades I've practiced. And so practicing in family law has changed. It certainly is my observation, and I think this is fairly accurate and representative of what's happening in the profession, that more female lawyers are drawn to family law.
Yeah.
If I looked at newly admitted solicitors who elect to go into family law, or if I was at a family law function or conference, there would be a lot more females in recent years that seem to be drawn to family law.
I follow you on LinkedIn, and I see a lot of posts where you are there with a lot of female lawyers.
Yes.
And
I look at my team, and there are 13 lawyers. I'm one of 13, and they are all female. And that's not because we advertise looking for a female practitioner, but there are very few male practitioners in family law in recent years.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I really don't know if it's because females are more drawn to that emotional element of it.
Yeah.
But if you looked around at sort of leading family law specialist law firms, there would be a lot more female lawyers, certainly under 40.
Okay.
There's still some very senior male practitioners who've been practicing for a long time. But in recent years, I think it's really swung the other way to a lot more females. Well, there's a lot more females in the profession.
Yes.
So that in itself would contribute. And I think with a number of the universities that offer law, there are more women enrolling than men as well. So.
Wow.
Being a partner in the firm, you're in a leadership position, and we talk about leaders as being somebody that you're inspired to follow or emulate. What would you say are the main characteristics of a great leader?
Look, I think that too has changed, because as a young lawyer, when I started practicing, you really wanted to be a partner one day. You wanted to increase and improve your technical expertise so that you could answer all of your clients' questions and had really good grip on the law, and you aspired to progressing your career so that you could ultimately become a partner. I don't know that as many young lawyers these days want to do that. I think a lot of them look at partners and think, I don't want to work those hours, and I don't want to have to work that hard to try and become a partner. So I think that's changed, and that's a shift that most of us who've been practicing for a long time have observed. And but going back to your question in what do I think I'd like people in my team to observe and be inspired by, I think it's about the way you respect your clients and trying to do really good quality work for your clients, trying to keep your word. If you're giving your word about this is going to be done at this time on this day, then following through with that and having them understand how, as lawyers, we trade on our word, and that's a really important thing in our ethical obligations, not just to clients but to the court, if you are in court, which a lot of young lawyers may not have the benefit of knowing about, because we've got this generation of lawyers who were admitted and then COVID hit. So for 2 years they didn't get to go to court. It's all on Microsoft Teams. And I was at a seminar on Saturday to help lawyers understand about ethics and how to present if you are online, and the fact it is still like being in open court. And so there's different things that we need them to hopefully watch and learn now. And then separately to that is, I hope they get inspired by the outcomes you achieve and the difference you make to someone's life, to their family, and the help you've given them.
Yeah.
So if someone is, sending you a thank you and you share that with them and you speak to them about, this is why what we do is so powerful, because it stays with people for a long time. And a lot of young lawyers really want to be part of that in helping their client be able to navigate and get out of the situation they're in. Because, let's face it, if you're a family lawyer, you're not seeing people at a happy time in their life.
Yeah. So giving them a sense of purpose, how they're contributing to their clients.
And then they feel like they've been a really integral part of this family being able to move forward and do those things. And then also just the importance of the conversations we have, being approachable, being able to workshop any questions they have, and to be able to have that within your team, because we do have the advantage of being a large team. So there's always someone else who will be able to answer the question. I make a real point, we have a meeting on a Thursday, of asking other lawyers around the table in my team what they think the approach should be in a matter, because they're all then contributing. And I often say to them, I want to work with people who know more than I do about. So family law covers a lot of areas, and we also have some lawyers who are really interested in parenting matters, others in complex financial matters or international matters. So workshopping, sharing that, and everyone feels like they've really contributed to maybe a more senior solicitor's case and giving them some guidance or tips or bringing to their attention something they should know.
So is that a formal CLE? So continuing
So we have
education?
Every Thursday at 1 o'clock, all the lawyers in our team meet together down here on this floor. We in a room like this, a bigger room than this, and we go through our weekly lawyers meeting and talk about what matters people have had, where they might need some assistance, or one of us might say, a client came in and they've got X, Y, and Z. Has anyone been in a matter where this has happened? And there might be different valuation issues or whatever it is, and people share that experience together each week.
Are there still things that come in that you've never seen?
Occasionally, yes.
Yeah.
Separately to things I may not have seen that require a legal resolution and legal advice. That doesn't happen as often. But as far as stories and facts, just when I think I've heard it all, 6 months later someone shocks me again. But it's good because you can go home and say, thank goodness I have a really boring life, and you're a voyeur listening to other things that people have done in their lives.
Yeah.
So,
without details, can you tell us anything that's shocked you in your career?
Or something that's really funny?
Look, I think one of the things that really strikes me the most is when people have two family law matters going on at the same time. So with a spouse and with someone else they were seeing that the spouse may not have known about but now has to know about. So they've got two property settlements.
Wow.
And it gets quite complicated because you have to deal with the spouse first and their entitlements, and then whatever the person has left goes into the pool for the next property settlement.
Yeah.
So I always think that's keeps people very busy.
Yes.
Clearly, if they're running two relationships and sometimes in different states or with complex arrangements.
Exhausting. Yes.
And then trying to unravel that, and it's inevitable then that everyone finds out about the other person that's been involved. So
well, we know a story about a particular pilot who had, I think, 7 around the country and overseas at the same time.
So they were keeping the international family lawyers all busy with different jurisdictions at play.
Yeah.
I see that you mentor your teams, and I have seen a couple of female lawyers that you have brought up through the ranks. Who inspired you? Who did you wish to emulate or gave you tips that you thought, we'll take those on board?
Yeah, look, for the first 7 years of my practice, I was in a very small firm and we didn't actually have anyone who provided any mentoring formally or informally. But at the end of that 7 years, I had a case against a very experienced lawyer who I really respected. And she had a position available. She was in a large firm, and I wasn't able to commit to a full-time position because I had very young children, but she was willing to take me on 3 days a week. And she was inspirational. She was generous with her time in teaching and training and letting me sit in on appointments. She wanted me to succeed. I always knew that when I was applying, for example, to be an accredited specialist in family law, she had my back.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing about our dynamic was she didn't have children,
Right.
yet always understood if there was a bit of a crisis for me, because I did have young children, and she knew I'd get my work done, even if I had to rush off for some medical emergency or something to do with one of the kids. So she was a great role model, and to have her calm approach, because she was always very calm, and she used to say she didn't feel calm, but she presented very calmly to all of us who worked with her. So she was very influential in my career.
Yeah.
And then, interestingly, the CEO who was appointed for our firm when I was at Coleman Gregg, and I'd been there for 12 years, the partners were very brave and decided that, look, they're lawyers but not managers, and they should step back from managing the firm and appoint a CEO. And they appointed a CEO who was not a lawyer but an accountant. And he took us all out of our comfort zone, and it was really unsettling with the changes that he implemented. But he became the person that was my greatest supporter and the best mentor I could have had.
Wow.
By really pushing me outside of my comfort zone, but also guiding me lovingly and in a caring way. So it was interesting because I had a male and a female.
Yeah.
And he was the person who I credit for being responsible in me being able to progress with my team. And then when I left Coleman Gregg and started at Mills Oakley, the 3 lawyers who I'd worked with came with me, and they're here, and we've had a really good time working with each other.
Yeah.
For the last 14 years, and we've added other lawyers who've since come and gone in that time that we've been here. But yes, so I would say one was a lawyer, a partner, female family law partner, and the other was a male non-lawyer.
Yeah.
But I would think both of them really made a very big difference to me progressing in the law the way I did.
Yeah.
And I also was fortunate, I guess, which isn't the story that many females in leadership positions have, but when I went in as a partner at Coleman Gregg, I was in business with 7 really decent men.
Yeah.
Who valued my work, my contribution. And whilst they'd had very different lives to me because they were much older, they all had wives who were at home.
Yeah.
And weren't having to manage young families, and, you know, they were at a very different stage of their life. They really let me come on board and work in a way where they recognised how valuable my work was for the firm, but to do it in a way that some of my female colleagues have not always had, and women in other corporate environments that I read about or I know. So I have had that good fortune of working with really good men too that have contributed, and it hasn't just been females.
That's fantastic. So actually being appreciated for what you bring to the business and your professional knowledge and nous and like how you handle yourself.
Yes.
It's very different to a story that Michelle told me once about a captain that she used to fly with who used to hover his hand over her hand on the control panel because a lack of trust in her. It's great to hear that you've worked with 2 leaders, one who was a technical expert in the law and one who wasn't necessarily a technical expert but showed that leadership. Could you list some of the character traits of both of those mentors?
I think generosity with their time.
Yeah.
And being really available to me when they were with me, and also thinking about how they could assist me when they weren't with me, so that they would send me an article or have a chat with me about someone they'd met, and making those introductions and connecting me with people that they thought I would benefit from, either learning from or working with, or who would expand my own skills.
Yeah.
And skill expansion actually was something that our CEO did undertake with those of us who were identified as people who wanted to embrace the changes that he wanted to roll out, which were quite unconventional for a really old, well-established law firm. Firstly, to appoint a CEO that was a non-lawyer and then give them a stake in the practice, so equity in the practice. And so that was telling of the partners that I was in business with and how progressive they were at that time, because I became a partner in 2007, but he was appointed as CEO a few years before that. And he identified those people who were willing to embrace this change and the new direction the firm was going to go in, which was a very brave move. And then saying, well, you should be able to go and learn how to do this and do that and acquire different skills. It's not just about having the technical expertise. That's a given after a while in the law. You know, you get good at it like any job.
Yeah.
You've been doing it for a long time, but it's all of these other skills that you need as part of your skill set. And I don't know that as a lawyer, if I would have actually thought about doing that, I would have just been working in the business and not on the business, and then progressing in that way. And then also the work that was done in making us a bit more aware of the impact we have on others working with us, and the younger lawyers or our support staff who work within our teams, and trying to engage with them and inspire them so that they could see what you're doing, hear what you're saying, and think, okay, well, I'd really like to aim to do that or follow that pathway. So it was that awareness that the mentors gave me of these things that I probably wouldn't have thought about, because you're so focused on your work and getting your work done.
Complex career that you've chosen.
Yes, and it's very consuming.
Yes.
So you need to have some time to step back and think about these things. But I even remember when the Sydney Olympics were on, and for a couple of months it was very quiet in the office, and the partner I work for saying to me, enjoy the lull, this doesn't last. Whereas as a young lawyer, I was getting really nervous. We're not very busy at the moment. And now I long for those lulls. But I just remember the calm approach with which Amanda said, enjoy the lull, this is a good time to catch up on your admin and do this and do that. And it was just experience, maturity, having seen it all before and how it unfolded.
I really like what you said about not just working in the business, but on the business.
Yes.
And a lot of leaders or people in business don't think about that. Their role is lawyer, and so you come to work, you do your job, and then you go, rather than maybe being partner, you have more equity in the position, but working on your business. Not a lot of people think of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think I was able to get from having the benefit of that mentorship. And it came at a time in my career where I probably really benefited from it. Because I wasn't too junior, but I wasn't set in my ways enough for it not to make a difference. And I was very open to trying to embrace it, and could see that he had a lot to offer the firm and what he was going to do for us.
Have you developed any routines throughout your career so that when you do come to work, you're bringing your best self? So we often talk about routines to make sure that when you're turning up anywhere, you've done everything that you can to turn up the best version of you possible.
Yeah, look, I think I've become very aware of the importance in the work I do of being my best self, regardless of what's going on in my own life. And I remember having young babies and dropping them off and driving to work and being very stressed because someone was crying when I left, and getting in the car and thinking, this is going to be really hard.
The guilt.
Yes, and stepping into the office thinking, I hope they've stopped crying. But then realising that what those people around me needed, people who worked with me, was me coming in, being as upbeat as I possibly could be and ready to focus on what I was doing in there and compartmentalising that and leaving it to one side. So having come to that realisation, regardless of what's gone on in my life, I have tried really hard 99% of the time to do just that.
Yeah.
Get into work and I am in the zone.
Yeah.
And I'm completely focused to such an extent that if my mother says to me, tomorrow can you ring and do this? I'll say, Mum, once I'm at work, I will never remember to do that.
Yeah.
Can you please message me? And she couldn't understand initially about why wouldn't you be able to make that phone call when you get to work tomorrow, when this shop opens or when the doctor opens? But it was because when I get here, I'm consumed by what I do, with the work I do, and I do a lot of face-to-face work with team members and clients. And then when I get in the car and go home, I can think about the other challenges that are still there. And what I have to deal with.
I did similar. When I went into the Blue Emu car park at the airport, I was no longer mum.
Yes.
I was pilot, and that's, my normal life admin stopped until I drove back out of the Blue Emu. So that was,
Which is good to hear when you're flying a plane.
That's right.
With all of us.
Focus,
yes.
But being able to compartmentalise, yes, definitely helps.
And it's not easy, and I see it in a lot of people I work with, when they bring that to work. And that too has changed in my observation. Once upon a time, not many people brought those issues, if they had any issues, personal issues at home, to work. Whereas now when you are managing people, you have to be prepared whilst you're expected to be on and together and composed and in the moment, that your people might have issues that are preventing them from being able to completely be committed to what they're doing. And if they're comfortable in sharing that with you, how you accommodate and deal with that as well, because it's changed. The workplace has changed, and what people are willing to discuss with you, and you almost have to be a bit of a psychologist yourself if you are in a position where you have other people that work with you where you're, in a leadership role. So
they spend so much of their lives with you. So
we spend a lot of time at work.
So having that support structure is very important for people these days.
Yes. And sometimes it's important too I think, for your staff to know when things might not be right for you, because it makes them feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
And I say this from my own personal experience. When I had a crisis in my life in 2011, it was remarkable how many people that I knew in our office on different floors were able to then come and speak to me about what had happened in their life. Because I think they
vulnerability.
thought, absolutely, that vulnerability made them feel comfortable. Susan will understand, she's been through it. And then they'd share some stories with me of what they'd endured, which was a real privilege, that someone would come in and say, do you have a minute? And, I just wanted to say sorry about this, and this is what, and then share their story.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible time. It happened for so long. And I even remember presenting at events, emceeing events, and we ran a Women in Business forum when I was at Coleman Gregg. And at the end of the event, someone who'd heard of what I may have gone through at that time, waiting till the end of the event to come and speak to me and share with me. And they were just a member of the audience, not someone that necessarily knew me or had any close connection with me. But so it's a balance, isn't it? You want people to still feel comfortable, because no one's life is composed and together all the time. It just doesn't happen. But if you look composed and like your life is all together, then people probably feel less comfortable. And I sometimes, as I get to know clients, share things with them that helps them feel better about the fact that things do work out and this will all find a level and it will all be okay again.
We're big believers in storytelling and using situations from your own life or someone else's life where you can tell them what happened, and you don't even need to tell people, look, so you too could. It's people put it together themselves, don't they? They put themselves in that story, something similar, and like, okay, yeah, and they come to the conclusion, well, it will work out, or it, there's light at the end of the tunnel. So
yes.
So
we talk about how it's a big contributor to psychological safety in the team culture as well, where if you feel like you can approach your leader, which you've obviously just described, then people feel safer, and when you feel safer, you can stop fearing, and when you stop fearing, you're going to be performing better as well.
Yes, and as you as a leader get older, you endure more yourself because that's just what happens in life. So you have those stories to share when someone wants to come and speak to you about what's going on in their life, or with a relative who might be ill, or whatever it is they're enduring. You can give them some guidance based often on having gone through something yourself too by that stage of your life.
No, you really are in the business of changing people's lives, families' lives. And Guy has mentioned a couple of times in our podcast that about Disney. And
Disneyland, yes.
it's Disneyland, so they're not in, the market of, so a cleaner, for example, is not there to clean the park. What is it?
They're there to make magic happen and then clean the park.
And I was in Disneyland with my adult children last month.
Oh, wow.
Because I do think it is a magical place, and I love it. And that is exactly how you are left to feel.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to love what they do, regardless of what they're doing. So the model must, I didn't know what it was.
Connect everyone to a higher purpose. So they don't go to work thinking I'm a cleaner or I dress up as Goofy. They're going to make magic happen. And by the way, you dress up as Goofy. By the way, you're a cleaner.
Yeah.
And so that goes back to what you were saying before about giving your team a sense of purpose and showing them how they're contributing to your clients' lives.
And that's why I make a point of always sharing the emails or cards that clients send.
Yeah.
And often more than one or two people have worked on that client's file. So they've all contributed in their own way in helping that client resolve their issues, whatever they are, financial, parenting.
Well, now I'm getting a picture as to why I heard so many great things about you before
thank
coming
you.
to this
That's very
podcast,
kind.
Susan. Now, your time has been very valuable. Thank you so much for sharing
My
your time with us
absolute
today.
pleasure, and I feel very privileged on being invited to be on your podcast.
I've heard so many fantastic things about you, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yes.
Is there any life advice you could give anyone who might be thinking about moving into the legal profession?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one because it's such a broad industry.
Can I say this? The legal profession continues, I think, to operate to a large extent the same way it did many years ago, and that is it is hard work. And I think you really need to be committed because there are so many other professions available now that weren't there. They didn't exist. When I was becoming a lawyer. But so I think people need to really be prepared to commit to long hours, lots of reading, and sure, there are practices that have developed in recent years where people are trying to do it a bit differently to still be able to manage the work-life balance. But that also very much depends on the area of law you're in. And if you're moving into an area like mine or any area that lends itself to litigation where your time is not really able to be controlled by you because timelines and dates are set upon you by a court or a tribunal, depending on what area of law you're in, you have to go in understanding all of that. So it's very rewarding, and if you enjoy working with people, but still not one of the jobs I would be suggesting or career paths if you're someone who wants to do it differently. And a lot of younger people now do want to do things differently. So I don't know who the partners of large law firms will be in 20 and 30 years' time.
Yeah.
But maybe it will just be a very different way of operating and
Possibly.
interesting times ahead.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Thanks for
you
having
being
me.
here.
Thanks a lot. Well, that was fun.
That was fun.
You're such a clown.
The clown.
Lady Captain.
And who's going to listen to this? Maybe our mums.
Thanks, Mum.